Hunt's Tarot Talk Witchy Wednesday live, but on Thursday because again, I forgot that last Wednesday was Wednesday. And it's a little bit funny because I try to have these lives on Wednesday because Wednesday is Mercury's day, and Mercury is the planet slash god of communication, commerce, short distance travel, bunch of stuff. Commonly employed to help, or implored, I guess I should say, commonly employed to help like poets, speakers, writers, tricksters, magicians. Mercury has got a lot of hands and a lot of hats, and most of them have something to do with understanding, comprehension, communication, and it is the planet of the intellect. So you'd think, oh yeah, doing this kind of thing where I'm teaching about the tarot and talking about it on Mercury's day, doing prayers to Mercury, this kind of thing would give you some sort of boon. And typically it does, but something that's very interesting about this last Wednesday is that Mercury is in retrograde. And when Mercury is in retrograde and you're looking at the planetary days, which tend to highlight or amplify planetary connections, you get really interesting phenomenon. Like, I guess it's that, the planets, they have a sort of window on the days that they rule where they're a little bit stronger, their voice is a little bit louder. But if they're speaking from a place of confusion or debilitation or exaltation or elevation, whatever the case may be, it kind of tends to show up in the way that they show up. So if you do something on a Wednesday and Mercury is functioning well or is well aspected in the sky, then maybe that helps you a bit. But if you do something on Wednesday and Mercury's in retrograde, as is the case last Wednesday, so like yesterday, maybe you're like confused and you forget a bunch of things and you kind of are like running around like a chicken with your head cut off, which is exactly what happened to me yesterday. So that's why we're doing the live today on Thursday. And it's really interesting because yesterday a bunch of Mercury stuff went wrong. It was a bunch of Mercury retrograde stuff in particular. Like, I got a bunch of emails all of a sudden that supposedly were sent earlier that I never got. One of them, like for shipments and stuff and for FedEx, they were like, oh, you have to respond on by the 11th or we're sending the package back and you're not going to be able to send this package. And I was like, the 11th is today. Where was this notification like a week ago? But I hadn't had any indication on my phone. There was no voice messages from any of the shipping companies or whatever. So all of a sudden I got a bunch of overlooked or hidden or lost emails just kind of like resurfaced on my phone for whatever reason. And maybe I just have bad Wi-Fi connection or something, and maybe that's why. But it was very bizarre, right? And what was even more bizarre is that the person who specifically was reaching out to me asking about a UPS or USPS delivery that got held up, their inquiry was not among the sudden burst of messages that I got. So it was weird because, he had said, oh, UPS said they tried to contact you to get my information because they didn't have my information, so they couldn't go through customs. I looked, and then all of a sudden I got a bunch of UPS notifications, but none of them were the ones that I needed, but they all still were like stressful and urgent. And so that just goes to show you the kind of stuff that happens with Mercury retrograde. Like, all of a sudden you'll get information that it's either too late or too fast or too slow to do anything with, and it creates a lot of confusion, and you end up having to kind of run around in circles to get back where you started with some kind of understanding. And so it's really interesting because it's not as if you don't get the understanding. Like, it comes just in really weird backwards ways. I had to talk to like my mom, I had to talk to my husband because they're helping me with the campaign. So I was like, do you know what this is talking about? And where's this person's order? And what else was nuts is that I am not involved in shipping, right? Like, once I package the order and I send it off to the post, I have almost no power or influence or say over what happens after that. Like, the shipment does whatever it does. So in the case of the person who actually asked me to look into it for them, they had paid for expedited shipping, so they thought they'd get it faster. I also thought that. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's the holidays, I guess. Maybe that's just the issue. Mercury's in retrograde, so that might be causing, an issue as well. But I have absolutely no idea. Like, they don't contact me unless they need to, and when they do a very poor job of it on the best of times. And then I got all these like voice messages all at once that weren't on my phone for weeks from FedEx, I think it was. And it was like 3 or 4 separate voicemails from different people who all had very different very difficult to understand voices for different reasons. Like a couple of them had very strong accents, and one of them just seemed like it had really bad cell reception. So I had literally no idea what it was saying, except for that you have to contact us right away. And then I would call, and I'd get put on the voice message not automobile, the automated voice message machine that would be like, "What's your problem?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. I couldn't understand it from the message. Give me an operator." And of course, the robots do not want to give you an operator unless you put some kind of special code in there. It's all very Mercury retrograde because I was like, I have a problem. I don't know what the problem is. I need someone to tell me what the issue is and how to fix it. Anyways, oh my gosh, it was bizarre. Anyway, good afternoon. So yeah, so it's just really interesting though, I think, as a case study, because I was having all of these issues with very mercurial things on a Wednesday, Mercury's day, while Mercury was in retrograde. I'm taking this this astrology fundamentals course with Austin Coppock, which I highly recommend. It's really good. I felt like I was I don't want to be like and I want to stay humble, right? Because astrology is huge and vast and there's so much to know. But at the time that I took his fundamentals course, I felt I was pretty solidly intermediate. I was like, yeah, I mean, definitely I have more to work on. I can identify some of my weaker areas, but I think I have a really good understanding of like what the planets and the signs and the aspects mean, which is really like the alphabet of astrology. So I was like, yeah, this will be good, a nice refresher, and then I'll move on to the more advanced courses because I'm very interested in his courses about like celestial magic and like working with all these things. Well, so anyway, it still has been really good. It's been a very good refresher for the stuff that I already knew, and there's been a lot of like subtle nuance added to it that was really valuable as well, and stuff that I also just like flat out didn't know. So it's really nice because when you're self-taught, you tend to fall into these like loopholes about, not loopholes, but I guess I should say pitfalls, right? Where you really research the stuff that's interesting to you, but then some things can kind of get left along the sidelines or whatever. So being able, I'm very skeptical and very critical of institutions in general, particularly educational institutions, because while I feel that knowledge and learning are incredibly noble pursuits, I'm very leery of how that gets manipulated and how information is biased and who gets to choose which information is important and why, and that kind of thing, and having like a degree does not necessarily mean you know what you're talking about. And this is true even with institutions that are very like culturally accepted, let alone fledgling ones such as those for magic or astrology. And in particular with like magic and stuff, I'm like, well, this is about your connection and your understanding, although the voices of the past and ancestral traditions are deeply important and informative. I mean, that's like thousands of years of troubleshooting done for you, so you'd be a fool not to look into it. At the same time, history has a lot of biases to contend with, so I tend to be very critical. But I will say I'm really enjoying Austin Coppock's course. I feel that he is very sensitive with the information. He has a great way of putting things together. And of course, I felt very comfortable going into that course because I read his book, 36 Faces, which was like, oh my God, so good. If you have the opportunity to get that book or to read it, definitely do so. So somebody's asking, can we use a star today? And yes, we can. First come, first serve. So we will definitely be doing that. So we'll be working with the Children of Astara. This mat is my Evil Eye mat. For those of you who don't know, it's also available or will be available on my site very soon. It was one of the Kickstarter rewards. Just thought I would let you guys know so we can get that out of the way because somebody asked after the live last time and I thought I should. See, so on the other side, it's that nice green color, and on this side, it's black and white because I can't ever decide if I like black and white or color. So I did both. On most of my mats have either like black and white on one side and color on the other side, or they'll have like an elaborate design on one side and a nice kind of textured colored surface on the other side. So it's never just plain. It's always double-sided, but one of them will tend to be like more simple and the other more complex because I'm kind of a maximalist, but sometimes it's nice, especially with reading mats, we have like room to breathe and the cards get to like be the focal point. So that's why that, if anyone was interested. Anyway, so some quick announcements and then we'll just jump right in. I'm still fulfilling Kickstarter orders. We're doing really well with that. I am late with my current podcast episode for the High Priestess because I love the High Priestess. She's one of my favorite cards in basically every deck I've ever come across. She's been my favorite card. Also, the number 2 is one of my main numerology numbers, so which is kind of funny. I didn't know that when I started really liking her, but it's kind of cool to see that play out. If anyone's interested, the High Priestess and Judgment are my birth cards, which is fun. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, she has a lot to say, and it's very, hard to communicate waters, right? It's the High Priestess is an energy that's very contrary to the magician in that, you know, if the magician is intention, the high priestess is intuition, right? If or instinct even, right? Like if he's communication and comprehension and consciously trying to turn the wheel and manipulate matter and manipulate fate and make something to his advantage or to work with it in some kind of very intentional way, then a high priestess is more of a silent avatar of acceptance, right? Like Zen acceptance, or it's kind of the receptive ability to feel everything that is and really become one with this like greater tide of universality. So it's less about cause and more about effect. And that's really cool and fun. But it also creates this situation where it's almost easier to talk about what she isn't than what she is. But I want to talk about what she is, obviously. So anyway, it's really fun, but it's taking a lot longer than I wanted. So hopefully that podcast episode will come out pretty soon. I'm about halfway through, I think. And of course, you know, it's hard too because I want to talk about, let me get my deck and wheel because I got to get my deck and wheel. I always forget to bring this beauty, but, you know, so the high priestess in tarot is associated with the moon. I'm going to go over all of this in my podcast, obviously. But so I want to make sure I talk about like the moon decans, right? You know, so for example, this is going to be the Seven of Swords. This is going to be the Six of Coins. This is going to be the Four of Cups. This one over here is going to be the Two of Swords. And this one over here is going to be the Nine of Wands. So, so the moon is connected to all of those cards because those are the lunar decans, and the moon is connected to the high priestess. Therefore, the high priestess is connected to all of those cards. The other thing is that the moon's domicile is Cancer. Cancer in tarot is associated with the Chariot. So we're looking at the zodiac sign Chariot. The zodiac sign Cancer. For the Chariot card, which is associated with the moon because it's the moon's domicile. So we'll be looking in the podcast at all of the, here we go, all of the decans ruled by Cancer, which is going to be the 2, 3, and 4 of Cups. Which is fun. And then we're also going to be looking at the Magician, the Hierophant, and the Empress as antithesis or opposite to the High Priestess, because I think a good argument can be made for all three of those cards as functioning as some kind of opposite polarity to the High Priestess. However, I have a lot of issues with this because truly a polarity should have one extreme opposite pole. Although I do think that the beauty of a tarot deck is because you're shuffling the cards as you work with it. Depending on your question, these roles and relationships can change slightly. The moon in astrology is one of the most adaptable planets. I mean, she's literally like the reflective principle. So she tends to adapt more to whatever sign she's in. So making kind of a more flexible, undulating, you know, waxing and waning presence already, she's very changeable and very accommodating, let's say. Probably more than any other planet. She's, well, you know, planet as in celestial body in astrology. She's very, very accommodating. And that has to do also with the high priestess's ability of like radical acceptance, right? Like, let me just find the high priestess in this deck and well, we might as well just, it's not quite fair because I'm not, you know, I'm supposed to draw these cards at random, but just like for the visuals really quick, because it's on my mind. I was working on the podcast script last night and the night before and the night before that. And you know, it's so interesting too, because of course the high priestess has a lot of associations with like mythology, right? This archetype of like the strong spiritual feminine, the wild witch, right? And so anyways, so the high priestess is usually illustrated with between two pillars, one white, one black. And then this, of course, is the extremes, right? The utter extreme of like absolute darkness and absolute light that she embraces and accepts regardless of external judgment, right? It's just, this is the reality of nature. And so she's primal, instinctual, and natural. And so she will accept all of these things. It's sort of like, you know, your emotions, it's not about facts. It's not about what's good to feel or what's advantageous to feel. It just, you feel it, right? It just happens. These are just kind of instinctual responses and, you know, set up by either trauma, caregiver patterns, or some kind of universal code, or just natural predisposition. But the way that we respond to things, you know, we get to choose how we act. We get to choose how we do the magician part, but we don't necessarily get to choose how we do the high priestess part. We can kind of consciously reprogram and over time create new habits and new instincts, but that creates a lot, that necessitates a lot of conscious effort and control and dedication, which is very, very difficult, even when you really really know what you're doing, it's very difficult to create those new neural pathways. It's not that it can't be done. It's just that the way that things are, it has a certain gravity. And I think that part of, not all of, but part of the high priestess's role is being able to acknowledge and accept what that is fully, to be able to feel it and embody it in this very like instinctual way. So it's very interesting. Of course, we have a ton of lunar goddesses we can talk about, so I have to narrow it down. And then I'm debating on whether or not to bring in the false priestess or the false popess or whatever it is. There was a Rachel Pollack brings it up in her book in 70 Degrees of Wisdom too, but there was a brief time where there was a female pope and it was like this whole big scandal, and there's like a legend part and then there's like a true part. And I don't quite remember that one as well, because honestly to me it's not very interesting. It's just like more Catholic drama, so I don't know. But I do think that it's very telling that throughout all of history, we have all of these pagan religions and spiritualities, and they all have this like this place for the goddess, the archetype, the feminine archetype, whether she's deeply wild and unkempt and mysterious and savage, I guess, suppose, for lack of a better word, or whether she's like civilized and prim and proper. And it's interesting because with polytheistic religions and faiths and theologies, we have this ability to really dissect, how would you say, the classical feminine archetype into multiple different aspects. So we have like the wild goddess of the hunt, like Artemis, and then we also have like Athena, goddess of wisdom and culture and convention. And I don't remember where I heard this. Somebody was like, "Oh yes, Athena is like the Margaret Thatcher of the Greek pantheon." I don't really agree with that wholesale, but I do think there's a certain amount of like, yeah, she's culture, right? So whatever cultural wisdom, that's kind of what Athena does. Versus, somebody like Hecate or Selene or Artemis, which tend to be more outside of that spectrum. And then you have things like Hera and Aphrodite or Venus, right? So you have all of these like really interesting facets of like this divine feminine archetype that contrast really nicely to all of these other facets of divine masculine archetype, if that's the language you like to use. But you get variety, right? And then you have Hermes, right? Hermes Mercury is canonically like very, I don't know, I guess modern, we might say gender fluid, we might say non-binary, we might say trans with like a capital T all the time. We have like even in astrology that's reflected where Mercury is neither masculine nor feminine, neither day nor night, very much dependent on what they need to be. So the ancients, I don't think, identified the ways that we do culturally, but you have like literally the origin of the word hermaphrodite comes from the offspring between Hermes and Venus, or Aphrodite, which was said to be like both masculine and feminine, and that's like the origin of that word. So it like existed in ancient consciousness, right? Like this idea of, yeah, we have an extreme here and an extreme here and a crazy spectrum gradient in between, and that's just kind of like the nature of life, right? So what's something that's really interested in all of these like kind of older systems is you have places for that, right? You can see that manifested in the theology. Whereas by the time you get to monotheism, you can do that if you're really truly thinking of like God or Allah or whatever as like the unified cosmic universal consciousness of all of creation. And you can totally do that, but people tend to not really do it. People tend to say that, God is everything, God is everywhere, we're all children of God or whatever, but they don't tend to act like it. They don't tend to really think about what that means and how that would mean that everybody is equally as valid and important and righteous and made the way that they're supposed to be made in the eyes of the creator, because the creator had, according to that theology, ultimate control over the creation, right? There's free will, sure, but then it's also like, you get into these really kind of awkward philosophical questions, or at least I do, because I tend to dissect everything I'm interested in, for good or for ill. But you get into these interesting paradoxes where you're like, oh, so, if they have ultimate control and if they really love us, why do they create pitfalls for us? And why do they try to, get us into these bad situations? And you could say, well, free will, so that it means more, so that you can like choose whether to be good or bad. But then it's like, well, how do you know what's good or bad in the eyes of the creator if that's really the case? And what does it mean to be good? Because if that is the case, if the goal is to find out, right, what this creator essence wants for our life, then we really have to think very carefully and very critically about our ethical codes, which we should do anyway, of course. But it it becomes like a double layered issue, because now we're trying to figure out, like, in the eyes of a god, what is good and what is bad. And I don't think those are questions that humans can really realistically answer. And I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of, like, well, especially in the podcast episodes too, because I'm thinking about justice as well, because the high priestess card is number 2. And so number 2 numerologically is tied into both justice and judgment. And justice, of course, is associated with Libra, which is ruled by Venus. Venus is the Empress, which I just saw over here. So, and we'll be talking about that too. The Empress is very commonly seen to be the other side of the divine feminine, and the High Priestess is like this unknown, secret, wild side, and the Empress is like, the receptive feminine mother, like lounging in luxury. The queen, right? I mean, she literally is like the empress, and I think there's some benefit in, well, I think there's some benefit in thinking about all of these things, right? Whether or not you agree with them, I think that there's some benefit in exploring the idea from purely an an academic perspective, at least. By the way, it says the Chariot, so that's linked to the High Priestess because this is the moon and that's Cancer. And it's really funny too, because when we look at, and I'm going to do this in my podcast, so don't worry about it, but we look at this, right? There's the High Priestess, the silent, receptive avatar of everything that is between the pillars of light and dark, between yes and no, between whatever. And then we have the Chariot, which, by the way, so commonly the steeds are black and white. In this one, I chose white and red because it's, well, there's a lot of reasons that we don't need to get into it. But the point is, right, if could be like conscious and subconscious, right? The liminal space, the guardian that sits between these liminal spaces of life and death, growth, decay, consciousness, subconsciousness. And the Chariot is where she's most comfortable, because the Chariot takes those principles and unites them and uses them to pull forward. It's sort of like, there's this really interesting Indian myth I just learned about recently. And so, oh man, I really don't want to get too distracted because we haven't even like drawn cards, but essentially there are these two brothers and they become in charge of this like very warring kingdom, and they both go to the kingdom across the way who has this like amazing army that's never lost, hoping to get aid. Spoiler alert, the king is actually secretly Krishna. And so they go but he's sleeping, and so the older brother, I think it's the older brother, maybe it's the younger one, I don't know. Anyway, one of them, who's more modest and more humble, he goes and he sees the sleeping prince, and he just sits down and he waits for him to wake up. And the other one comes bursting in the room and is like, hey, yo, give me your armies or whatever. And he kind of wakes him up and he goes, oh, well, I think that this gentleman who's been sitting here first maybe should speak first, because when you were storming in through the door waking me up, they were already sitting there, so clearly they got there first, so listen to him or whatever. And he basically says, okay, I'm gonna you can either have my army, my elephants, my generals, all of my amazing military force, or you can have me, but you can't have both. And because this guy was patient, he gets to pick first. So clearly he picks him. He picks to have Krishna on his team. And and the other part of it is that he's not going to, he says before even getting started, I'm not going to pick up a single weapon for this whole fight. But he still goes with him nevertheless. The point is, he becomes his chariot driver. And so it's this really beautiful metaphor for having the power of the universe driving your chariot. And then I first heard about this myth on the podcast Myth Matters. It's really good. I want to say I forget the episode. It's called I'm so bad at pronouncing names, you guys. I'm so bad at it. But I think it's called the Bhavanayita or something like that, or the Javanayita. I'm sorry, I'm really bad at it. But if you go to Myth Matters, it's sort of one of the more recent ones. And there's this speaker who talks about it, and it's very, very fascinating. But one of the things that she says is that, so the prince, or not the main guy, the brother, he's like the ego, right? And Krishna is supposed to be like this, the chariot driver is like the universe, the power of the universe. And one of the interesting things she says is the ego, you don't want him driving your chariot, right? He makes a really good servant, but not a good master. And so the idea is that the ego should always be in service of this greater whole, this greater karmic whole of the universe. And so it shouldn't be driving the chariot, it should be assisting, right? But anyway, that was a big long tangent. But the point is that the chariot is known as a card of success, like success and victory and control. And that control is kind of a little bit of a misleading word, because how you get there is by fully accepting and embracing the poles of everything, of all of reality, this Zen acceptance, and then using the current flow of the universe to kind of help you get your chariot in the direction that it's like supposed to go in, that it wants to go in, and then use your ego, right? Because that's part of the equation as well, to assist, right? So we're using these forces together in harmony, and that's what makes the chariot so powerful. It's like being in the right person in the right time in the right place with the right mind, all of that, like getting everything in order. So that you're going with the current. And that is what gives the chariot so much power. It's almost like you can't help but be victorious, because your soul, your body, your ego, your mind, it's united. And it's not only united, but it's united with the greater essence of universal flow, right? You're like, this is the reason that I'm going this way, because it's the way that I'm going, because it's the way that I'm meant to go, all of that. So the chariot has this really great like connotation of being about, victory and willpower and control, but it is in a certain lens, it's almost like the control, the power to let go a little bit, right? The power to know that you don't have to constantly be like this on the reins all the time, and you can kind of you can push and pull, right? You can work with the flow. You don't have to be going an uphill battle. You can be assisted by how things already are and by how things are going. You don't have to completely like rewrite everything, which is part of the reason why usually the charioteer is kind of like either loosely holding the reins, not holding the reins at all, or just kind of like seems very confident and is not like really struggling and exerting a lot of force. If that was the intention to depict, I have no doubt that Pamela Pixie Smith and other tarot illustrators could draw that. They could draw a very burdened charioteer, really like holding the reins and really trying to actually actively control things. But it's not really about that. It's about the universal dance, right? Being able to move in step and in line and push and pull as needed. And the high priestess, why she comes after the magician, is because, yes, between the magician and the high priestess, we really have the recipe for dealing with everything for the whole rest of the deck. Because if it's not about pushing, it's about pulling. If it's not about control, it's about surrender, right? And between those two polarities, we have the potential for essentially everything else, which is really nice because it's kind of reflected. Like Rachel Pollack in her book 70 Degrees of Wisdom frames at one point the fool as being the child, and the high priestess and the magician as being their celestial parents, and the empress and the emperor as being their terrestrial or earthly parents. And that's a really interesting framework for all of those cards, because yeah, between those four, and that's the reason why they're first, you really do have the ability to kind of birth all of the rest of the deck and all of these other energies and stuff like that. So anyway, maybe we should actually get to the thing. So hello, and it says, oh, well, I appreciate you trying to add as much as you can into the podcast. I appreciate having a condensed resource. Yeah, you're welcome. I hope it's good. I do want to, it's hard because I wanted to make the podcast okay, how do I say this? Sorry, Mercury is still in retrograde, so let's all be a little bit easy on communication standards. The podcasts are really nice because, or really attractive ideas. It's a really attractive idea to me because I do want to create books, but you are very limited with how much space per page and, how much whatever. I mean, everybody who knows about the Nameless One Grimoire knows that I don't mind writing a big fat book, but you have to be a lot more concise. Like, believe it or not, there was actually a lot that was edited out of the Nameless One Grimoire, And podcasts are nice because you're not necessarily constrained to that. You're just talking. So you can split it up into multiple episodes or do whatever you want. And so I really am trying to make it as thorough as I can. Of course, it is, the nature of the beast. As soon as I'm done doing it, I'm like, oh, I could have added this or that or the other thing. And it is also true that, people are not necessarily going to want to sit down and listen to a 4-hour podcast, or having one episode split into 5 parts is kind of a bit gratuitous. So there are still limitations, but it's a little bit less I don't know, less strict, I guess, than if I were to be trying to write the material, and a little bit easier. I mean, I guess I am writing the scripts because I'm trying not to get too far off base. But anyway, so today we have the Ace of Swords reverse and the 4 of Coins reverse. So please remember that these are reversed in case I forget, but I'll leave them upright so we can look at them first and then we can talk about them a little bit more. Okay, and then, okay. So I'm just looking at some of the other cards. I can't decide if I want to talk about the two cards at the bottom of the deck or if I want to talk about these guys. So I guess we'll just start here and see where we land. How about that? So the aces in the minor arcana are very important to notice when they come up because they're very strong initial bursts of energy, but they are kind of fleeting and they are very changeable, right? This is the first card of the suit of swords. So it's kind of laying the groundwork for the entire rest of that journey, which in this case is an intellectual journey because we're dealing with swords and swords are air and air is intellect. So usually when we get the Ace of Swords and it's upright, we say things like, okay, so it's a moment of clarity. There's some kind of understanding. We found some information. We had an idea, right? We've have something we need to say. There's some kind of either communication-based or thought intellectual-based thing that wasn't there before that now all of a sudden is and appears to be there. So when it's reversed, we say things like, oh, clouded judgment, fogged mind. We don't really know where to start. We have a lot of ideas potentially, but not a lot of direction or clarity, or we have no ideas and we need to get something done. So if you're ever like in a situation where as a student, you have to write an essay and you have to decide what to write and you get the Ace of Swords reversed, it's like, yeah, you don't know. You just don't know. You haven't thought about it. You don't have a very strong idea one way or the other. Versus like getting an upright ace would be like, oh yeah, you totally have an idea, right? You exactly have an idea of where you want to get going. So the other thing is that when the Ace of Swords shows up reversed, it can indicate lies or deception. Sometimes the reason things are unclear is because that is somebody's intentional will. They have manifested that situation because they want to obscure the truth for some reason. So if we had this right next to a court card, we might say, oh, somebody is lying, right? We might say somebody is not being deceitful or maybe not maliciously purposeful, depending on the other cards. You might say maybe somebody's confused, incompetent. They just don't know what they're doing. They're just ignorant. They haven't thought about it very much. They're acting on impulse. If you got a court card reversed, I would tend to read that a little bit more malefic. Versus a court card upright maybe would be, oh, they're trying to add clarity or they're trying to help, but the effect is the same. The effect is it's not working. We did get a court card at the bottom and it was upright, and it does make sense that the Page of Swords would show up with the Ace of Swords reversed, because it's like, yes, so we're trying to play with some ideas, right? We're trying to figure things out. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of kind of ambiguousness, but we are earnestly looking to bear witness to the truth, whatever that is. We're trying to find it. The page is something that's interesting because one of the best ways that I like to think about it, in my opinion, is pages are characters who have almost no social power or influence, but they have a lot of inheritance, right? They bear a lot of social consequence. And the idea is, right, if the kingdom is falling to shit, it's probably not the page's fault. They probably did not do anything. They're not in a position of power, so they couldn't have really done anything to make it shitty. But they still will be in danger because of it, and because of their proximity to the royals, they'll be even more so, right? Versus, if the kingdom's doing really well and, they're really lounging in luxury, that's also not really because of their efforts. That's just because the kingdom is doing well and they get to live comfortably, and that's part of how it goes. So when we talk about how this relates outside of metaphor, outside of archaic, medieval, archetypal, metaphoric kind of a thing, social order, we think about, okay, so a student, right? A student, a younger sibling, a child, or somebody who's very new in whatever avenue, because this is swords, we would say, yeah, somebody who's new to the job, who doesn't really know the technical aspects. They don't know the rules yet. They are earnestly trying to figure it out, but they're just not very experienced. Sometimes the Page of Swords, one of the best things the Page of Swords can do is bear witness to the truth, right? That we're talking about intellect, we're talking about communication, and we're talking about looking for truth and wisdom and knowledge. I mean, that is ultimately the goal of the suit of swords, is clarity, wisdom, truth, and knowledge, right? And to communicate these things with intent and with a certain amount of purity, pristineness, right? We don't want rusted swords. We want sharp to the point, so to speak, right? So that's kind of the point of the Suit of Swords. And when they're reversed, there's something going on here that is blocking this energy, that is dulling our intellectual blades, that is lowering our awareness. And sometimes this can be kind of pleasant or unpleasant. That doesn't necessarily, the swords is not about feelings. So for example, having the Nine of Swords reversed, that feeling of anxiety that's commonly associated with the nines is alleviated or blocked or dulled. And that can be pleasant. But it can also be unhelpful depending on what your situation is, right? There might be a reason that you really need to think about. So like, okay, so as somebody who is anxious, right? I don't want to say that there's a reason that you feel anxious and you should really think about it and try to figure it out, because that is kind of the crux of like an anxiety condition, is that you always think that there is something really intense that needs to be worked out right now, or there's some kind of like great gravity attached to it, and there isn't necessarily always. However, I will say that at a baseline, unless otherwise afflicted, as you might say in astrological terms, your feelings are there to tell you something. And if you're anxious about something, that, you know, that might be worth some exploration. And the Nine of Swords is part of that process of figuring it out. So when it's reversed, it feels better because you're not as worried as you used to be. And sometimes that's appropriate, right? Such as if we get the Nine of Swords reversed at the end of a long inquiry and it's like, okay, well, we're starting to feel better, then that's probably good. But if we get the Nine of Swords reversed right away and it's connected to all of these other more kind of ominous or looming cards, we might say something like, oh, you know, you're trying to ignore this, but maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should work it out. It's going to depend, and it also has to be modified with just common sense. Like, what kind of person are you, or is your client? Are you normally anxious? Are you normally not? You know, do you normally have a good judgment about these things? Because that should also, you know, those are like, I think those are fair questions to ask your client, to be like, to making sure that, you know, you're not going to give any bad advice. Just be like, if you are normally an anxious person, then this might mean that, like, yeah, it's good. You got to be able to take a step back. But if normally maybe you're not, then, you know, it could indicate it's still a reverse card. And ultimately we want to go through the deck, and reversals tend to kind of send us backwards in time to a different thing. So it's just something to keep in mind. But in this case, the point is, since the Page of Swords is upright, but the Ace of Swords is not, we would say there's an earnest attempt to learn or pursue truth or knowledge or comprehension of some kind, but it's not really coming to us right now. Either we just don't know what we want, we don't have a clear idea, we haven't learned the rules yet, there's some kind of block here. This card was also the Four of Pentacles. Oh, sorry, that's one other thing. Yeah, these are just associated with the elements. They don't have deconic rulerships. I suppose you could say loosely, well, you know, Aquarius, Gemini, and Libra are the air signs. So you could associate the Ace of Swords with any of those. But truly it's just the element air, right? It's like the very beginning of the air element, the air vibe. So that's all that there isn't. The only further association is with the Magician as a #1 card. The Magician is #1, so this is one of the tools of the Magician. And you can almost picture it as like the person, the figure bearing the Ace of Swords is giving it to the Magician, which in many older traditions of reading tarot, the Magician is one of the cards that can symbolize the querent or the client or the person reading, because literally, like, you're doing magic and divination. If you're using a tarot deck, you're, you know, you're being a magician. So so that's kind of an intuitive leap. I've read some books like way early on that must have been written, oh, I don't know, in like the 70s or 60s or something. And a lot of those older books say, oh yes, if you're male, then the card that represents you is the Magician, and if you're female, then the card that represents you is the High Priestess. I don't love that. I think it's more of a who do you relate to more, and if you even want to pick a significator. In my opinion, the whole deck kind of represents you, and also the people that you deal with, you know, through court cards. So if you wanted to have a significator card that is you, I would say it's probably more important that you just like relate to that card very strongly. But even then, I would be leery, only because, you know, that card can represent you in a certain aspect, a certain situation that maybe comes up a lot, so you identify strongly with it. But like, no matter how noble or righteous a person is, we're not going to be justice all the time, right? Sometimes we're going to have to wear different hats. No matter how good you are at spell work and figuring things out and troubleshooting, you're not going to beat the Magician 100% of the time. Sometimes you're going to be the Empress or the Emperor. Sometimes you're going to be in a Two of Cups situation and be the Lovers, right? Like, it just depends. You can't be a thing all the time. You're kind of like a, oh, I don't know, co-permeating flesh suit of spirit and matter, constantly cycling through different situations and energies and interacting with other things outside of yourself and within yourself that also are kind of a part of you. Like, it's a very complicated situation. So you're never really going to be one thing all the time, just like the ocean is never in one place all the time, right? Rivers are never in the same spot twice. Like, yes, the river is there, but constantly the water is moving, and you can't exactly say that, like, this grouping of water one day is the same as the next. And if that is the case, then you're dealing with stagnant water, which is not really conducive to it's not really what we want from the human perspective. As far as metaphors go, thinking getting stale, that's, it's not really what we're looking after. So but anyways, so so it's interesting, right? And of course we have the page of swords backed by the magician, which, relates back to the ace. So yeah, like, there's an earnest attempt at troubleshooting here if we get cards like this. There's an earnest attempt to control things, but we're new at it. We don't really know what's going on, and that's going to influence our results. If we were to look at the top couple of cards, we can also kind of see this reflected still, right? There's some kind of shame, humiliation, a fall from grace. The Six of Wands is very interesting because it's, while it does often, when reversed, indicate moments of shame or a fall from grace, it's very often a more internalized experience than external. And I suppose it depends on the kind of life you're leading. But usually it's not like, like Cersei's walk of shame from the Game of Thrones, people throwing things at you and saying boo and you're completely fallen in station or whatever. Usually it's like you do a social faux pas and you feel like a complete buffoon, right? Like, you feel like you didn't do that right. Or you lose a competition you tried really hard in, and nobody else is really saying like you suck, but you feel like you suck a lot. It's those kinds of like, oh, I could have done better. I could have had it, but I just didn't. The Six of Wands is associated with the Jupiter ruled decan of the zodiac sign Leo. Leo, of course, is the dominant sign of the sun. Solar activity is about being kingly, being in control, being very visible. And so when Jupiter and the sun interact, when Jupiter and Leo interact, it's very much like big and benefic and noble and in a very visible way. So think about being crowned laureate, right? Or getting some kind of Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Peace Prize, or winning a competition and being given a prize. It's very visible and a very visible recognition of your Jupiterian qualities, which is to be noble and spiritually elevated or intellectually elevated in some way, depending on how your Jupiter's aspected in your chart. My Jupiter is in Virgo, so of course I would think of intellectual elevation, but there's no real, anyway, just whatever, you're getting elevated in esteem in the eyes of your immediate group, or even in your own eyes, your own estimation. So it's really good, right? When it's reversed, it's almost like if Jupiter blows a big bubble, then the reverse kind of pops that bubble. It's like, oh, you ain't shit, kid. Sorry, right? Like, you didn't do it right. You didn't get there. So there's some kind of like a failure, or at least a feeling of failure. It's not always as grave as like literally you lost, Hell's Kitchen, right? You lost the chance of a lifetime or whatever. So I'm like watching Hell's Kitchen all of a sudden, just like out of nowhere. But anyway, so yeah, it's not always just like, you didn't get the thing that you most wanted ever in this world in a very public way. But sometimes it feels like that. Jupiter and Leo kind of feels like a magnifying glass. And if people are looking at you and you're, on the broad screen TV, and you're very visibly not doing well, that feeling really sucks. And that's oftentimes what the Six of Wands reversed represents. And I worry about public failure quite a bit. My son is in Leo, and it's not in this decan, but it is in Leo, and it is also in the 8th house, which is a dark house, and it's also making a very kind of light opposition to the sun, or to Saturn. And Saturn is making an even tighter, but still somewhat loose opposition to my Mercury. So oftentimes I have a lot of anxieties and a lot of shame about looking like an idiot, right? Or looking like I don't know what I'm talking about, or looking like I don't have a lot of authority. So I really do try to do my research as much as I can to compensate for that. And there also is some issues because some parts of my philosophy are a little bit contradictory. And I do think that there is room for exploration, experimentation, for learning, for just kind of pulling things out of the ether and sitting with them and seeing how they feel or whatever. I mean, that's kind of part of how you learn, right? And I do think that part of what we agree is right is social convention. It's just a lot of people saying the same thing, which does not empirically necessarily make it correct. It just makes it what you're more likely to be, accepted for believing, which is not the same thing as being truth. So being truthful or having genuine insight. So I'm kind of like, it's the same thing I have with that whole like structure of education, right? It's like on the one hand, I think that can be an amazing boon. On the other hand, I think it can be a little bit misleading because sometimes it's taken advantage of and it's corrupted and it's has a lot of internal biases, and especially in like America too. I mean, we have like this huge bias against for-profit schools or like trade schools, but they're all for-profit schools. Like you can't look me in the eye and tell me that like UCI isn't making a ton of fucking money off their students. And I mean, and like, or just like, you think about like Princeton or like Ivy League schools where like parents donate entire, however much money and get wings dedicated to them. And obviously their progeny get accepted forever. And you're like, that's not for profit though. Like, it just, whatever. So it bothers me because it's like, on the one hand, educational institutions are really valuable in that they set up a curriculum by which you can measure yourself. So you don't necessarily fall into that pit of like, I don't want to look at it, so I won't, because somebody is forcing you to look at it from an external lens because there's some kind of culturally agreed upon value to the thing. So on the one hand, that can be very valuable. On the other hand, institutions telling you your shit just because 1,000 people for 1,000 years have thought that way doesn't necessarily help us move forward collectively. It doesn't really help us embrace new ideas collectively. And at the same time, it's like you have to be careful because any idiot can just say a thing, right? Like we get that all the time constantly. And so my relationship to the truth of information is like volatile already. And so the idea that I'm trying to posit or propose information that I find is valuable, that I have researched, it kind of puts me in a tight bind where I feel very nervous, right? Because even if I have found value in this and I believe it to be true genuinely, and I pull from sources, and those sources are earnest and have done their research, and if you go far and far and far back around the line, like you just don't know. You don't know exactly where any of this information is coming from, and we can't even prove we're not in the matrix, right? So, anyway, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but it's a very delicate balance, I think, when you're really trying to look at truth, if that in its purest form actually exists, and if we would know it if we saw it from the perspective of human consciousness. Those are things I think about a lot. So usually when this card appears, it always, for me, will speak to me about this crippling shame or anxiety about being publicly called out as being an idiot. And I think that that really happens because Saturn is making an opposition to my Mercury. So Saturn, which is about a planet about rules, restrictions, responsibilities, hierarchy, institution, also just like the things that endure time. It's a very like hard boundary kind of protective. It makes things hard and brittle and enduring, but also very isolating and very like exclusionary and all this stuff. So when Mercury, who's already a trickster, and this is so beautiful because honestly, I mean, of course, Mercury is a trickster. Of course, words are misleading and deceptive and confusing and inherently human, right? Like, whenever we create a system of categorization, like any kind of system of categorization, like that's us showing how much we understand or don't understand about a thing, right? Like the different phenomenon. Okay, like let's talk about Pluto being a planet or not being a planet because it's so obvious, right? Okay, so according to the original Greek understanding, planets were travelers because compared to the relatively fixed stars in the sky, planets move around a lot. And so planets were just stars that moved. That was the original categorization for planet. Of course, they were limited by the planets you can see with the naked eye, which end at Saturn. So that's what they used. And the planets and stars in older astrological texts are always intermingled. They're almost used interchangeably, depending on when you look at it. During the Enlightenment period, we became super anal retentive about creating arbitrary categories for things and giving them super specific criteria, and then making everything had to fit in this category or it had to go in some other category. And while there is value in that, it also becomes very limiting. And let's be real, it becomes a way to enforce classism, and like if you're not even like standardized English, right? If you don't speak a certain way, you're not educated, so we shouldn't listen to what you have to say. That's not true, but that's a cultural perception that we get based on, however our societies are structured, whatever categories we make, right? People who speak this way are educated and people who speak this way are not. And educated itself means a certain thing. Of course, Mercury is involved with all of this because sometimes it's just bullshit and it sounds really good, and sometimes it's deep essential truth that doesn't sound coherent at all, and you as a human now have to consciously shift through that and figure out what is good and what is not, knowing that those things, those innate categories of good and not good, can be relative to both human perspective and individual human perspective. So whoa, quite the cluster. It's and then it's like, oh, we're going to implement that institutionally, and these are the things that are good to teach, and these are the things that are not good to teach, according to who? According to the dean, according to the country, the president, whatever, like who, the president of the educational system, the whatever. So I don't know, like, that's all I'm saying. Of course, Mercury is a trickster. So when you're always kind of looking at this like tricky, conscious, relative, linguistical kind of maybe yes, maybe no, I think that when you have Saturn oppositions to that, there's a really strong feeling of like, no, right? Like, no, at a certain point, there is a yes and there is a no, and you're being an idiot. Like, seriously focus, right? At least that's how I tend to experience it in my own chart, right? And it usually that no is on the end of authority. It kind of tends to, at least in my experience, when Saturn is involved, it tends to favor tradition. I think Saturn is oriented towards the past, and it tends to kind of favor what has come before and what already is. And that can be very useful, as I've said many times. But it can also limit what could be, right? And if we just expanded our minds a little bit, if we allowed ourselves to explore some of those other kind of like mercurial loopholes, what insights or revelations might come to us if we weren't so fixated on what someone else told us was legitimately good or legitimately true. And obviously, that's a slippery slope. I mean, there's a reason that Saturn exists, and there's a reason that no, and that boundaries and that criteria and curriculum exist, because you can't just, give every absurd thought the same amount of weight, right? Like, if the earth is flat or not. I mean, I think we've moved past that one a little bit. So, I mean, we haven't apparently, but anyway, the point is, it's like a very inherently tricky place, and I think Saturn really wants to like cement things and make things solid and be like, this is yes or no. Ultimately, there's a material limitation, and this is it, right? So anyway, this is very interesting. Not that you need to know all that about Saturn astrology to understand any of these cards, but it's something that might be interesting to know is how you identify with this particular card. I don't know, maybe look at your chart and see where your sun is, see where your Jupiter is, and see if there's anything that's making an opposition or a square in your natal chart, because that might show you areas where your ego shrivels away and it feels very insecure, right? And that's kind of the feeling that we get with this reversed Six of Wands. The Six of Wands upright is about like public recognition and like nobility, and you're given prizes, you're given acclaim, you're given public acceptance and recognition. It feels really good. And it feels really good in a very solar, egoic way. Like, yes, me, I as an individual have risen above the rest, and I shine as better in some way, or I'm recognized as good in some way. And that feels really nice. But it feels nice because the sun is happy with that. When it's reversed, it doesn't feel nice because now we look like the opposite, right? We've been publicly shamed in some way, or we feel publicly shamed in some way. So for me, because of my chart, it's very likely that this is going to have to do with like a Saturn, Sun, Mercury opposition where you feel shame because of inaccuracy or not enough authority or whatever Saturn represents, right? So it might be an interesting experiment to look in your own chart and see if you have anything conflicting with your Sun, and what that might give you as far as insights into tarot, right? When this card shows up reversed, where you can start troubleshooting then. It's like, oh, okay, if I know that this is a solar card because it is in the sign of Leo, the domicile of the sun, and I know that this is a Jupiter card because it's the decan of Jupiter, then we know in our chart what kind of things feel good in this very Six of Wands way. And if we look then in our chart or even in our past experiences, then we can also kind of figure out what things feel really bad when that way is like exactly flipped on its head, reversed, you might say. So anyway, it's really interesting exercises. It's part of the reason why it's fun to connect tarot to astrology is because it gives you now two maps that you can use for troubleshooting these somewhat complicated ideas. It doesn't always have to be that way. Tarot is an independent system and does not need astrological assistance, and definitely vice versa with astrology does not need tarot assistance. But when you use them together, there's a really beautiful synthesis that happens there, and I think it's worth exploring. So that's my thesis. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Anyway, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just count this. I just want us to remember, just in the background, that somebody's trying to troubleshoot something, and there's not much clarity here. Okay, so let me drink some coffee because I am very, very, very thirsty. I just can't wait to get my decks. Hope they will ship soon. Haha, me too. I also can't wait for you to get your decks, and I also hope they ship soon. I feel like we're sending out orders pretty much every other day because it takes us about a day to prep a bunch of stuff, and then the next day we go and like build the orders, and so we end up getting like usually around 100 orders every other day. So there's a good chance we might finish before the holidays. But now we did all of the orders where people got just a deck first because it was the easiest, and we thought we'd just get them out of the way. So we were doing like we were getting a lot of done really, really fast. But now the orders are starting to get more complicated. You know, like one person got this deck, and this deck, and another deck, and a specific pin and a specific mat. So it's becoming more complicated, which takes longer. But hopefully it'll be resolved soon. Because I would also really like to not think about this anymore. I love making tarot cards, but I don't so much love shipping when it gets this overwhelming. And people have a lot of questions, and I very often don't have answers for them, which again, we've talked about. I don't like not having answers for people. But whenever you ask me a question about shipping after I've already sent it in the post, I probably don't know. It's going to take a lot of troubleshooting, but I mean, obviously, please reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns. I try to work with people and I try to like do some sleuthing, but it's just the post is freaking that's a whole other thing. I'm not connected to it, you know? So anyway, all right, let's talk about this card because it's really interesting. The Four of Pentacles, or the Four of Coins. You know, and I made the Children of the Wheel series, of which Ostara is one, to be based off of the Rider-Waite-Smith system. So they say pentacles, I say pentacles. I don't know why I say they, as if I'm a different person than I guess I was a different person when I came up with it than I am now. But anyway, I do like coins now more, though. It's easier to say, first of all, smaller, looks better in the title. But also, there's a lot of cool metaphorical, like symbolic reasons why I like coins. But anyway, let's not worry about it. That's a whole other rabbit hole for a different time. Excited for my things to come, but I am one of the complicated orders. I thank you for your complicated orders because that probably means you got a lot of things, which helps me very much. So don't get me wrong. I love the complicated orders and I love when people are excited about my stuff. It just takes longer though, that's all. It's not a bad thing. Yeah, but it does. Yeah, we are starting to get into complicated orders, though. So the good way of looking at the more positive spin on that is your order probably will be started soon. Okay, where was I? So coins, right? And I'm not getting into why I'm starting to like the word coins over the word pentacles. That's what I'm not talking about. Okay, what I am talking about. By the way, very Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius would be like, oh, what am I not talking about? This is the Sun's decan of Capricorn. Oh, and hey, we're getting more solar things because this is solar because it's in Leo, which is the domicile of the sun. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, this is the Sun's decan of Capricorn. So Austin Coppock has this really interesting little story kind of memory thing that I think is valuable. I like the way he thinks about stuff. It's not typically how I viewed this card, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you his version. But basically he relates it to being like a mob boss, you know, and so if Capricorn is about like building structures and institutions, then the Four of Coins, which is the sun ruled decan of Capricorn, it's like, I own this town, right? Like I built this town. I am this town. You know what I mean? And when you own this town, you get to control the resources that come and go and who gets what and why. So typically, yeah, you know, Capricorn is the Saturn, is a Saturn ruled sign. Saturn is about on the one hand, darkness and death and decay, and also hierarchy and also structure and time and things that withstand the test of time and boundaries and restrictions and responsibilities. Capricorn is really an interesting sign. The goat fish, moving through the material as though it were water, right? Really understanding the rules and the structures of the material, of what is, of the physical world, to such a degree that you can navigate it very, very well. Have you ever seen a normal goat climb? I think I posted a while ago on my stories this meme I saw of this goat climbing this absolutely vertical brick wall, just climbing it. Like, it is supernatural. It looks wild. And they don't look like they'd be good at balancing, but they just are. Goats are amazing. I so want a goat. Anyway, I so want a pet goat. But whatever. The point is, that is how Capricorn is with structures, with hierarchies, with things that exist in the material. They will find a way up it, around it, whatever. They'll do it. They know how the material works. They're very comfortable within the material. And so they will work within the box of what exists to get things going. And that does not mean that they play by the rules. It means that they know the rules. They know how to navigate them. That means that they're able to, like in Austin's I forget what you call those learning devices in Austin's story, the mob boss, right? They operate outside the law, but they're able to get away with it because they understand how the world works. They understand how the material world works, who you have to bribe, who you have to not, who you have to avoid, what you have to work with. They know how to get things done. And so they can come to control an extraordinary amount of resources. Now, this can just as easily be anyone who has any kind of control over their own resources or other people's resources. But again, Capricorn is about building structures, and the sun is about the king, right? So who's king of these resources? And what does a king do? Well, first of all, the king is very commonly known to do whatever they fucking want because they're king. They're the top of that hierarchical chain. But the king also has a certain amount of responsibility. And the same with that mob boss in the other story, right? They have to take care of their people. If they don't take care of the people working for them and with them, they're not going to be respected long enough to get things really done the way that they want, and they'll probably be overthrown or betrayed. A king is only as powerful as his subjects are loyal, is something that I like to say, right? If you're not taking responsibility, if you're not ruling the areas you're responsible for responsibly, you probably won't be ruling for very long, right? Sometimes there are exceptions, but history abounds with solar figures who are taken, who are brought low because people are unhappy with their performance at the head of the helm. So, this is one of the things to keep in mind. Now, really what we're talking about here is resources, right? Okay, so we have, this is alfalfa. Alfalfa, by the way, in magic is known to be good at bringing in wealth and also keeping wealth. This is probably linked to alfalfa's use as a food for livestock being a very primal source of wealth and ability to sustain, right? Because, when winter comes, if you have a cow or if you don't have a cow could be the difference between you living or dying. And of course, having a cow and not having a cow is necessitated by being able to feed the cow. So alfalfa is also quite elevated, right? As is, straw, hay, oats, wheat. Anything that you can feed yourself or your livestock with is very important in the primal human consciousness, because that is the difference between life or death for many people. Food, shelter, and water, man. Like those daimyo rice lords in Japan, they knew it. That's where you get the power, is through the food. But anyway, regardless, we're just dealing with material resources because it's coins. So yes, food, water, shelter, money, finances, also labor, education, because those are, especially in a more modern world, oftentimes how we get our money is through our labor and our time, and sometimes even our intellect, right? If it's intellectual labor, but that's going to be more of a situational kind of a thing. We did start this reading out with the Ace of Swords, so you might have an intellectually laborious job where you're having difficulty troubleshooting, even though it's your job, so you can't take care of or provide for people in the way that you said, and it feels very shameful, and we're not getting things done. Like that could be a thing that's happening. Or you simply just, you're being very conservative with your resources, with your time. And it's maybe making people think that you're stingy, looking down on you in a very social way, and being like, this person is not a great person because they're not sharing any of the wealth or resources or time that they have. And it's, causing some kind of confusion or some kind of communication breakdown. I say communication because, again, Ace of Swords and part of Swords is communication. So at any rate, though, So here we have this scarecrow who's like guarding the 4 coins on this field of what's that word? Cultivated alfalfa. And then there's the crows flying away bitterly in the distance. And so there's these questions that are drawn by the 4 of cups, sorry, 4 of coins. Which is like, okay, so if you get to control the resources, who gets what and why? And why do you get to choose, and what is your reasoning for that? Because the crows also need to eat. And alfalfa is a natural resource. It's grown by the earth. And pollinators helped to grow it, and the water and the soil and all of the things that weren't yours, even if you like to think that they're yours, they belong to nature. So, so are you being greedy or are you being conservative, right? There's a kind of a fine line between those things. You want to conserve enough resources so that you get what you need to survive, certainly. And sometimes you do need to withhold resources from others for their own good, such as when, oh, I don't know, a mom takes the hoard of candy away at Halloween and parcels it out a little bit by bit throughout the year so that their kids don't just inhale pounds of candy and then have severe stomach aches and blood pressure spikes or blood sugar spikes, excuse me. Um, and that's not the mom being greedy. It's the mom trying to conserve and ration a resource in a responsible way. So this is kind of the crux of the 4 of coins. We want to ration a resource, a material resource, in a responsible way. And sometimes there's a scarcity mindset, and that kind of pushes things over from conservative to just downright greedy, to just miserly, to not giving anybody anything. This is especially problematic when, and I mean, we can totally, this is the reversed 3 of cups. So yeah, social tensions, right? It makes you not very popular. And maybe the reasons for doing this are unclear, and that's part of why the Ace of Swords is here, but it's a unpopular public opinion. Let's not give this stuff not popular, right? Not, doesn't feel good, isn't fun. Maybe the Page of Swords is a character who can't do anything about it. Maybe they would like to give more resources, but the higher ups won't let them. They say, sorry, they can only relay the message. This is the other thing. Part of the reason why pages are oftentimes messengers in a reading, delivering information regarding the contents of their suit, is because that is not only one of their roles. Literally, pages in medieval world would go around delivering messages and doing little chores. They're basically like interns of the medieval world, their job is to learn how to someday be a knight or a king or a queen. They're not there yet, though, and so their tasks are often relegated to, simple things, chores, running errands. But delivering messages is huge, right? And the reason is they don't have that much power, but they can tell you how it is. Particularly the Page of Swords, their power is to tell you how it is. So I had this one experience. I was at where was it? It's not the DMV. I always call it the DMV. It's like a social services center kind of a thing, but it's very much like the DMV. It's government owned, and you wait in line forever. And a bunch of people who hate also being there tell you a bunch of things about how the rules are, which change with every freaking presidential election. It's so annoying. Anyway, so I was working on like health insurance issues and seeing what I applied for as far as aid. And so I'm doing this tarot reading while I'm waiting, because what else are you going to do if you have a tarot deck and a giant, 4 hours to kill waiting in line? So I do this tarot reading for how it's going to go, and one of the things I get is the Page of Swords. And sure enough, I go there, there's this young woman who's sitting and typing, and I expect that she's going to be leading the meeting or telling me what's going on. But all she does is type on her computer over and over and over again. Then this older guy, and kind of asks some questions. This older guy comes in, starts talking so fast, throwing numbers at me. I just don't understand. He has a very thick accent. I can't understand him. So then what she does is she says, oh, he's saying this. He's saying that, right? She's literally just there, a young person learning, giving me messages from on high, basically, from a source that she cannot change or influence, but that she knows pretty well and can interpret, right? So literally in that case, the Page of Swords was very much a person who was just able to tell me, this is what he's saying. This is what he means. This is the rule. This is what you have to do. And not in a way to help me necessarily like a queen would, right? It's not like here's the loophole for how you can actually get the best out of the situation, and here's who you have to know, and here's what you need to do to really succeed, right? That's going to be the queen, because the queen has influence and has power. The page is just going to be able to tell you, Section 5, Article C says this, period. That's it. They're not going to tell you, oh, by the way, it would be smarter if you went to this and did that and did this other thing. That's a queen role because that's first of all supportive, and it's also very helpful. It's a very powerful alliance that gives you information that can help you better your situation or your status or your understanding, which is what the Queen of Swords does. Whether she's giving you the gossip on somebody else, by the way, so and so just got a divorce, so please don't ask him how his family is doing right now. If you're going to be way more successful, if instead you do this or you say this, somebody who can offer you really wise counsel in social situations or in judgment situations or institutions or whatever it is. That would be more of a queen thing. The page isn't going to necessarily tell you that. The page is just going to be like, the boss wants to see you, and the rule is this, and here's your coffee. You know what I mean? The Page of Swords has a limited amount of power. Now, it still is an important role, obviously. Somebody, if it wasn't for that woman there telling me what this guy was saying, I would have been totally lost. So it's not as though it's not helpful. It's just that it's, she was learning the rules herself, and so she was good at telling me what the rules were, and she was good at literally translating for this other guy that I could not understand. But it's not like she was, offering me advice. She was just telling me the truth, right? Bearing witness to how things are. And, she did say, like, yeah, he talks really fast, sorry, it's like this, right? But clearly it's somebody who knows how to, is in the system, is still, a page is part of that royal court, but they don't have that much power. They can help you out a little bit, but not that much. So anyway, so going back to the Four of Coins, or the Four of Pentacles, oh wait, hold on, let's see. I got a comment, says, oh, next time you do a Kickstarter for a deck, could there be a possibility of getting a pendant made for the Children of the Wheel like you made for the Nameless one? Oh yeah, that could be a cool idea, actually. Yeah, I think I will do that. Thanks for the idea. Yeah, so what they're asking, in case for, I don't know, whoever knows or doesn't know if they come on. For the Nameless one, I had these little like enamel pendants kind of made originally, and I've never had anything like that made for the Children of the Wheel. So maybe for the next one's going to be Yule. So maybe for the Children of Yule, that can be a Kickstarter reward, which will be fun because they're relatively easy to have made. I mean, it's hard to work with manufacturers at the best of times, but ostensibly they would be like the pin, but just smaller and as a pendant. So I think that'll be easy enough to communicate with my manufacturers. It says, I wear the one I got from the Nameless one all the time now. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. I always wonder because, I mean, I think they're really cool looking, but I also think if I made those pins, if I made the enamel pendants for the Nameless one again, I might make them with a silver metal instead of a copper metal, only because I like the way the copper looks, but technically the Nameless one has like, like the silver foil, so I might do that next time. I think there was a time when I was debating having the Nameless one be copper instead of silver, and that's maybe why. I don't know, I just really like the way the copper looks, but maybe for the sake of cohesion, I should make it silver next time if I ever reorder those. Anywho, oh, and the other thing, I was thinking of doing a Kickstarter for an expansion pack for the Nameless one, for like more sigils. I have made some more sigils since that deck, and I don't know, I think it could be nice. Plus, there were all those sigils that got honorable mentions in the back of the grimoire, but weren't like official, so I don't know, it could be fun. Just something I've been thinking about, but I don't know. It's hard because on the one hand, that could be fun and it could be cool, but I have a lot of other deck ideas that I want to get out there, and I don't really love looking backwards, so I kind of want to keep moving forward, but who knows? Who knows how these things go? I'm so fickle. Yeah, I think the expansion pack would be cool. I guess, I don't know. And the other thing is it has to be like enough interest to warrant another Kickstarter, because those are an incredible amount of effort as well. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe. We'll think about it. Anywho, yes. So the Four of Coins. Now I do believe this came out reversed as well. So when the Four of Coins comes out reversed, By the way, this very much paints a, let me try to, this paints a really clear picture, don't you think, of like a situation where we're trying to conserve things from a place of scarcity. Maybe it's not clear to others or even to ourselves why we feel the need to be so retentive on all of our things, not wanting to let anything go, but it's not making us very popular. And it doesn't seem to be, it could be the result of this situation of feeling shamed or feeling ashamed of something. So you kind of tighten up and you don't share, you don't give any explanations, you don't enlighten anyone about the situation, and you just kind of close in, and this is not making things very popular. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself as far as interpreting things as a reading. So the Four of Coins, I think we've pretty much covered. When it's reversed, it's you really walking that line poorly. It's withholding for the sake of withholding or for the sake of power, being greedy with resources such as time, labor, money, food, shelter, whatever it is. If you are, for example, in a situation where, say, oh, I don't know, you're living with somebody and you guys are both paying rent, and I don't know, all of a sudden, maybe the person you're living with has an emergency happen. I don't know, their cat swallows something and they have an obstruction and they have to pay $4K to have surgery done, like my sister just did. And so you're kind of coming up short for rent. And the other person is feeling also very scarce, and so they say, no, this is unacceptable, you have to pay it, like you just have to pay it, and they're really domineering and really into that, and there's not that much like social grace about it. It causes like a falling out or something. That could be one situation, or another situation where somebody just won't, oh, how should I say it? Like if you're in a position where your partner makes a ton of money, but they're kind of controlling and they won't let you have anything or have any freedom or whatever, even though, let's say, you take care of the kids and you clean up the house and you're very generous with your time and your emotional labor, your invisible labor, as it's sometimes called, but they still they won't let you go out with your friends because they say, oh, it's too expensive, or they don't want to do anything fun or do anything nice or give you any kind of pleasurable experience because they're so so intent on conserving the resources, even though you are providing in a way because they control. Again, Saturn, Capricorn, Sun, we're dealing with control. Because they control all of these resources, you're still very stuck, and it creates tension. And let's say they won't listen to reason, right? It's like, well, look, I clean the house, I do the dishes, I take the kids out, I do all of these things. Like, don't I deserve a little bit of freedom, a little bit of time with my friends, or a little bit of money to go, I don't know, do a spa day or something. Like, I've been doing all of this other things for you. Like, can I please have this resource? And they're like, no, absolutely not. And it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, they just won't hear you, right? This is kind of the situation when you get the Four of Coins and the Ace of Wands or the Ace of Swords reversed. It's like they won't listen to you, the reasons are unclear, but resources are being withheld, in a really kind of, maybe not intentionally malicious way, but the result is somewhat malefic. I mean, it is Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, which is a malefic, so there's a difference between things that don't feel good but are necessary for the sake of responsibility, and things that don't feel good and are also mean and cruel and restrictive and controlling. And Saturn definitely can do both of those things. So Capricorns are very responsible, and they know what needs to be done, and they know the bills to pay. And so, let's say that same situation where you have like a house partner who's taking care of everything, and you have like a partner who's more financially controlling. Now let's say that same situation, but it's not that they don't see value in what their partner is doing. It's not that they don't want to provide something for their partner, but instead it's like the financial situation is just very severe right now. They're not making enough money at work. They don't have the resources, and they just really have to close the purse strings. And it's not like a personal thing. They're just trying to be responsible. Well, so then we might say, okay, well, this situation is bad, not because they're not, opening up those resources, but because they're not communicating about it. They're not saying what they need to say, which is like, look, I love you and I appreciate what you're doing, but we just don't have the resources right now. We just can't. It just doesn't make logical sense to do it. We have to be more conservative. So when the Ace of Swords appears reversed, either you're not being told what you need to be told, or you're not saying what you need to say, and those are both very important things, right? It's you can have every good reason in the world for not doing a certain thing, but if you don't express that clearly, then chances are it's not going to be very popular with the people who it's affected by. Sometimes even when you express that, it's still not very popular, and that's fine. But at least then you've done all that you can do. Now, I will say, obviously, right, okay, no is a complete sentence. If you're uncomfortable with things, you don't have to elaborate. But there is still that social expectation of wanting to understand the reasoning, right? Usually, not always, but if people are reasonable, when we understand the reason, we're a little bit more willing to grant leeway, right? We're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'll calibrate accordingly. So that doesn't always happen. It depends on your situation and who you're with and all of that. But communication can be very helpful. You don't have to explain yourself, but sometimes it helps. It depends. Oh, thank you for today. It was good to hear your voice. I've got to bounce till next time. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you being here. See you next time. But at any rate, so it does depend on the situation, but and sometimes nothing can really be changed and feelings are still hurt or whatever. That does happen as well. Um, but yeah. When we have the Ace of Swords reversed, you're not getting information, whether it's because somebody's not saying what they need to say, somebody's not hearing what they need to hear, somebody is not understanding what they need to understand. There is a block, and that block is intellectual. And intellectual blocks tend to be rooted in miscommunication. Not always, but very frequently. So we've talked about these guys. Let's talk about the Three of Cups. So when the Three of Cups is upright, we're talking about the Mercury ruled decan of the water sign Cancer. Mercury is the planet of communication. Cancer is the cardinal water sign, or getting things moving, getting the waters of emotion moved by eloquent communication or emotional communication. This is like three friends, drunkenly talking about past situations, getting really teary-eyed and nostalgic. Nobody else understands what they're saying, but they understand what they're saying because it's not about understanding the words, it's about understanding the speaker, right? It's about understanding the emotion. This is Mercury in water signs is sometimes said to be like communicating underwater. And it's true that you lose that clarity, that precise accuracy that Mercury is known for, that exact fact-based communication. But what you gain is a different sense, right? Like how fish can feel each other and the vibration of the water. It's this idea of there are still ways that we can communicate, sometimes deeper ways that we can communicate when we let go of that accuracy and we speak to the beauty of poetry and emotion, right? I mean, it's very common to get Mercury in Pisces where it typically is not known as doing super well. But to have positions where Mercury's in Pisces and that person is like a poet, right? Or a songwriter, an artist with the voice. It's not that and sometimes, and this is sometimes the case with poets, that they're very inarticulate in day-to-day conversations. But if you read their poetry, you're able to really pick up on something that's even more profound, right? Something that reveals a greater truth. So Mercury in the water signs is really about emotional communication, understanding emotions, comprehending emotions. And of course, when that goes well, it creates really fun, friendly dynamics where people understand each other and they have fun with each other and they drunkenly toast and have a good time. And when it's reversed, we get the opposite, right? We get situations where things get lost in communication. People are like not making sense. They're just, you say things like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you ever say that? Or why would you ever feel that way? There is a tendency, I think, with Mercury and water signs, or not, I shouldn't say Mercury and water signs. I should say people with very strong Mercuries, say like in Virgo, dealing with somebody with a Mercury in a different place. And it's like the way that they communicate is so different that it's almost impossible for them to understand each other. And it's not that one of them is stupid. It's just that there's a fundamental disagreement, disharmony with how they communicate that doesn't quite mesh. So the Three of Cups in tarot reading is very often associated with things like, friend groups falling out, having a fight, an affair. One of these things is not like the other, right? Like secret, meetings or betrayals or things like that. And sometimes the betrayal is not a malicious affair, an intentional like backstabbing. It can really just be a miscommunication that ends up kind of bubbling over and becoming a bigger issue than it needs to be because the feelings are involved. And the feelings don't really care about facts. They are triggered by external stimulus that does happen and is real, but they are an internalized process to alert you to those things, and the feelings do not necessarily stay in proportion to what is needed or to what is going on, right? It's very personal. Um, so when we get the Three of Cups reversed, there is a tendency to have really emotional conversations that either are unhappy, unpleasant, don't go well, are miscommunicated. There's crying involved. It's not like a fun time, right? So when we get this upright, we get Mercury's decan of Cancer, and yeah, maybe people are making sense, but they're having fun. They're just like being silly, or they're having a nice time together. They're understanding each other, not based on the words they say, but the people that they are, the vibe, the emotion. This is very akin to when you're hanging out with your two best friends, and it's sort of like you just know each other, right? You don't need to totally make sense all the time. You just get it. And when it's reversed, that same kind of intimacy, or even whether it's the same kind of intimacy or it's literally just like you have no idea what the other person is saying, um, these are both situations that can be covered by the Three of Cups reversed, because it's like you're taking things way too personally, right? Um, or it's just, yeah, there's like a miscommunication breakdown. There's just something is, it's a lot of crying, a lot of screaming, nothing's going well. Backstabbing or betrayal is possible, but it's not like, we're not looking at the Seven of Swords. We're not, which by the way, asterisk, because that's not always what that card means either. But the point is, it's a Three of Cups. It's softer. Even when it's reversed, it's not going to be like a necessarily a premeditated, like this is a betrayal. But it could feel that way. It could feel very much like a betrayal. And I have seen it before where, you get the Three of Cups reversed and you're worried that your significant other is cheating on you, or that your best friend is going behind your back, or, there's some kind of social issue and the communication is obviously lacking, and that creates a confusion. And whether that confusion is legitimate or just, paranoia or feelings overcoming the senses, that can be up for debate, but the feeling is there regardless. So the Three of Cups reverse very often coincides with hurt feelings and misunderstandings, miscommunications, friends falling out, bad parties. um, this in the same way that the Three of Cups upright can be your support system. And so even when you have, like, let's say, for example, you have all of these cards, they're still reversed and they're still unpleasant, but the Three of Cups is upright. Then you would say, oh, well, you have friends that you can rely on, that you can go talk to, that might be able to give you advice, that might be able to support you, because this is going to be a loving, supportive kind of a local community or friendship, or something like that, because it's upright. And so you have like the situation where, you're confused and you don't know what's going on and you feel so ashamed and there's some kind of scarcity of resource and you don't know what to do, but you have this really uplifting mercurial friendship, right? You can go talk to somebody, you can go ask for help. But when it's reversed, that kind of puts us in a more difficult bind, because not only is all of this stuff still happening, but now we have interpersonal relationship drama, right? Now, maybe either because of this, or either, even if it's not directly because of this, but as a result, right, it feels like there's nowhere that we can kind of go to turn to. So when we get a spread and it's all reversals, it's really important to understand that this speaks to situations that can definitely happen and need to be acknowledged, but also that this provides us the map for troubleshooting. When we look at reversals, we're looking at energies that are not, they're blocked, right? They're not accessed in the most optimal way. They're blocked, they're repressed, they're out of balance very often, too much or too little of the thing. It's very easy to say, like, okay, so with the Four of Coins, we have a scarcity mindset, right? We're very worried. We have all this control and responsibility over these resources are really restricting. One of the things I like to do with reversals is look to the card before it. It's like we have not mastered that lesson yet. The card before the Four is the Three. The Three of Pentacles is about collaboration and teamwork and hierarchy and getting things settled. It's the Mars decan of Capricorn, where Mars is exalted. It's this idea of like, we work together to accomplish things that we cannot do alone. If you feel the need to squeeze the resources, maybe it's not that you need to squeeze those resources, maybe it's that you need to ask for help. Or maybe it's that you need to have conversations with the people who are supposed to be helping you manage those resources, who are maybe not doing as well as they could be. So we can go back to the 3 to figure out how to unkink the 4, right? This idea of like, okay, so if we're taking on all of the responsibility, and we're allowing all of that pressure to really make us feel like there's not enough, maybe we can ask other people to help us out with that, or at least explain the situation, or somehow deal with that to alleviate things. And then, of course, you don't have to look at it that way. You can also just be like, well, you can upright the 4 by just trying to let things flow through you, to kind of loosen the reins a little bit. Very much more often than not, the 4 of coins shows up when we're being too restrictive. There is a possibility it could show up because we're being too loose and we need to, actually tighten the reins a little bit. But more often than not, in my experience, it tends to be like you have a lot of scarcity in your mind and in your heart, and it's not necessarily the case in reality. And we need to be able to relax. Like a closed fist can't receive more, so we just need to relax and let things come to us a bit more, and not be so intense about keeping things close. So that tends to be the case. Because this is the Ace of Swords reversed, I would also say, like, yeah, we're not seeing things clearly right now. We might think that we need to really be super stiff and rigid and controlling, but this is because we're not seeing the bigger picture. We're not communicating. It's not, things aren't really what they seem to us right now. We're not operating with the full faculty of our intellectual sense. We're going off of something else, which maybe is not linked to the reality of the situation. When we have the what's this card called? Six of Wands. I'm like, I can't think of what the card is called. That's Mercury in retrograde. Anyway, when we have this reverse, it's oftentimes feelings of shame, and maybe the answer is not doing better. It's just being kinder to ourselves, right? Allowing us to make mistakes. So everybody makes mistakes. That happens. It's not a big deal. It's not do or die. More often than not, it's fine. We just need to kind of reconcile with the fact that, yeah, we're inhuman, and we're inhuman. We are human. And every once in a while, we're going to kind of stick our foot in our mouth and make a mistake. That happens to the best of us. So if we let go of that, we can kind of come to a better place. And it's so funny too, because if you look at the 5 of Wands, where you're really like struggling to fight and succeed, and like putting a bunch of pressure on yourself, and so we have the reversed 6, you look to the upright 5, and the upright 5 is like, yeah, try your best, engage in competition, try to succeed, but also like that's it, it's, as they say, it's just a game. Like, it doesn't matter if you're on Hell's Kitchen and you're fighting for the top chef, or if you're trying to do the winning shot in your pro basketball life or whatever. Like, it's at the end of the day, that's just one small chapter of your life. You have a whole life, and not all the chapters are going to end on like happy resolutions. Like, cliffhangers make things interesting. Sometimes you don't win, and that's okay. It's just part of the game. It's part of the system. It's part of what makes it fun when you do win. So, and unfortunately, like, shame is hard to deal with, and the reverse 6 of Wands oftentimes corresponds to feelings of shame or humiliation. I think a lot of the time too, it's just, I don't know. I don't really believe that any feeling is useless. But I do believe that they can become very debilitating when you're focusing solely on the negative and you're not really putting things into perspective and trying to work with it. I mean, shame fundamentally tells us that we are disappointed in ourselves or in our performance. And I think there's something good about wanting to do better, wanting to do the best that you can. But if you're so overcome by shame that you don't allow yourself to move past it, well, it's certainly not going to help you with any victories in the future. Right? So anyway, And then the Three of Cups, right? Analyzing our relationships, thinking about, did I say something wrong? Did I misstep? Did I take things too personally? Is this person fundamentally not my friend? Which is also an option, right? Sometimes if you get yourself in the same fights with the same people, maybe it's not you, maybe it's not them, maybe it's you together. Maybe your alchemy together, your chemistry is just not good for you. You know, sometimes people are fine, and in certain relationships it brings out the worst traits in each other, and you have to just let it go. That also is an option. Sometimes we just take things too personally and we just need to reconcile. You know, we need to say what we need to say, make things clear, open up our hearts and our minds and our time, give people the time and the benefit of the doubt. Definitely a spread like this shows a lot of like, no, you know what I mean? A lot of like, I won't give people time or resources. I won't give myself the benefit of the doubt. I won't let myself feel better. I won't go to friends, and I can't go to friends or something. Like, there's a lot of this. And then, because again, the reason that I'm erring on the side of it's probably not as bad as it seems is because this Ace of Swords is reversed. We're not seeing things clearly. Something fundamentally about the intellectual, communicative aspect of life is not balanced, is not accurate. When we get the Ace of Swords, whether it's because we're being purposefully kept in the dark, or because we're keeping ourselves in the dark, or because we're just not looking at the bigger picture, or whatever it is, we're not seeing things the way that they are. And we're not communicating them the way that they are, right? So anyway, so that's what I have to say about that today. I have a couple of other announcements. I've been trying to put more of my malas and stuff on my site, so I wanted to show you guys some of the things I haven't posted yet, but I will hopefully be posting on my site either today or I don't know, soon. So these malas are, I hand make them. I knot all of the different gemstones together with intention, and I use the different stones for the purpose of which I think is good. Yes, communication is so hard. Anyway, so this one is really nice. It's a jade lotus bead, and it's got this like these beautiful aquamarines and moonstone. I love that combination. So yeah, I'm going to post that one on my site later today. It's quite lovely. And then I also have this one, which is not a mala. It's just a necklace that I liked, but it has pearl and emerald. I got these raw emerald beads. I think they're so interesting. But emerald is really cool, associated with like domestic bliss, harmony, sometimes linked to Venus, sometimes linked to Mercury. Anyway, isn't that so pretty? These like raw emeralds are so cool. They are dark because usually emerald is on like a black matrix, but they're so pretty. So, and I did this nice little like gradient thing. I know it's hard to tell on this mat. I did not choose the most ideal mat. Here you go. But it makes a gradation with that emerald. So yeah, so this one's not a mala. It's like a shorter necklace, but I don't know, I thought pearl and emerald was like a really nice romantic combination. Pearls are supposed to be good for like wisdom and creativity and also healing and health, virtue, that kind of thing. So that's fun. This one I actually made a long time ago. These are sterling silver spacer beads, but they have this kind of like dark patina on them now. And I kind of like it. I don't know, it makes it look kind of like antique-y, but because they're sterling silver, they could very easily be polished up and made to be really shiny again. So I haven't decided if I want to polish it or not. I think that the antique look is kind of cool. Makes it look more of like a dark vintage thing. But I don't know. I can't decide, because some people really like that look and some people really like the really bright, shiny silver. But one of the cool things about silver is how it like reacts to the chemistry of the air around it and stuff. So I don't know. Any opinions on that? Because once you polish it, it'll get tarnished again. That is what a patina is essentially tarnish. But it takes a lot longer. So I don't know. If people are into that, it's certainly easier to leave it than not. But I don't know. I haven't decided. I kind of like the contrast that it makes when it's darker. Anyway. Thank you. So your malas are so good. Hope to be able to purchase one soon. Me too. I think I'm going to have a Yuletide sale, so maybe be on the lookout for that. Usually I try to do a Sabbath sale where everything on the site is 22% off. I just haven't decided. We haven't put Ostara up on the site yet, and it's still a pre-order, so I try not to include pre-orders in that. But then also, it's not really that big of a deal because Ostara at full price and then 22% off is still not as much of a discount as would have been gotten through the Kickstarter. I really try to make it so that the Kickstarter is the least expensive it'll ever be because, you know, those people are helping me fund my dreams on the ground floor. So I feel like that should be rewarded, and the reward is typically discount and exclusive Kickstarter items. So I think it should still be fine. 22% is less off than the Kickstarter discount would have been. So I don't think anybody should be bitter about that. But I don't know. It's just hard to figure out how to like logistically manage all of this stuff. And I, of course, have to take more pictures and put stuff on the site and make listings. And then I have to still send out all of those orders. And then there's this simple fact of like, well, we're already backed up, you know, with the Children of Ostara. So I don't want to send out like somebody's order before the Kickstarter orders are finished, because it doesn't seem fair that people who place that order first might not get it first. So then I'm like, well, and then, you know, people meanwhile who place the order on the shop site will be like, why is this taking so long to ship? And then I have to be like, because we have to ship 1,000 more orders before we get to you in the queue. So, and maybe it's just easier to leave Ostara off of the site until the new year. I don't know. Anyway, so I have to figure out stuff like that. Says also, can I ask if all the Ostara decks from the Kickstarter have been shipped? You can ask that, and no, they have not yet. I'm still working on it. We are shipping about 100 orders every other day, more or less, but now we're starting to get into more complicated order sets, so it's taking a bit longer, and we're not getting quite as much out per day. I say every other day because it takes us about a day to prep a bunch of stuff, you know, like tape all the boxes and put all of the decks in the pouches with the stickers and put it, you know, make everything together, all of that. So that takes a little bit of time, and we try to do a bunch of that all at once, and then we put them all together and then ship them out. So basically every other day is what we're looking at. But yeah, we're making progress, but we're still not there. I want to show you guys some of the malas that are currently on my site right now, because it's hard with, for some reason, I can't seem to post a picture or a video on my website. I thought I could, but every time I try, it doesn't work. But it's really nice to be able to see these in person. So this one is up right now. It's golden rutilated quartz, which is such a pretty stone. And it's got this really nice like 3D teardrop too, which I like. Anyways, golden rutilated quartz is also known as Venus hair. They have these natural inclusions in there. They're just so wildly pretty. They're supposed to help put you in alignment with like your spirit guides in the higher realm. As quartz, it's a, you know, a natural, like what they say, the universal healer, right? Or the great healer stone. So quartz is already like that, and the Venus hair really like amplifies it. And then this is sodalite, which is called the poet stone, or the sometimes it's called like the truth stone or something like that. But it's supposed to be really good for like inspiration and clarity and bringing heart and mind together so that you can like, you know, write about it or express it. It's made hand knotted with yellow. Yellow is associated with Jupiter. It's, you know, a philosopher, right? Spiritualist, guru, teacher. So that's this one. I really like this one, and I almost kept it, but I really want to make more malas, and to make more, I have to sell more so that I can afford to buy the gemstones to make them. So you know how it is. So it's more fun to make them for me, so I have to let them go. But some of these I did actually make for myself, and then I was like, no, I want to make more actually. This mala, I'll go crazy. Oh, thank you. This one is from Golden Sheen Obsidian, which is so cool. It has like this really beautiful, well, golden sheen. And what's cool too is it has that on the reverse. It's just flat, so it's like good for scrying and stuff, which is fun. So yeah, Golden Sheen Obsidian, like all obsidian, is very protective, very good at shadow work. And then of course we've got more of these golden rutilated quartz beads. They're very pretty. Oh, look at that one. So nice. Anyway, again, made with yellow. So, you know, yellow is for Jupiter, for clarity, insight, for understanding, for spiritual, how do you say, like blessings? Because, you know, Jupiter offers blessings. That's one of his roles. And then, of course, dragons are really popular motifs for a lot of reasons. Very divine, intelligent creatures capable of offering a great protection against evil and maliciousness in Eastern traditions. And then this gorgeous moon mala. Dude, I'm like obsessed with moss agate, man. Like, it's so beautiful. But it's got this really nice translucent aspect, translucency on the agate, and then these really cool moss agate inclusions. This one's made with green silk, and then these are white jade. I love white jade because it's supposed to ensure that all of the energies are going to like the highest purpose or highest good, which is nice. And it pairs well with just about every gemstone. Like it feels like it goes really well together. And then moss agate is a lucky stone. It's a stone of the earth said to bring abundance, prosperity, but also intellect and clarity, because Mercury is supposed to rule over like multicolored stones and green stones. So moss agate is both of those. So those are really beautiful. We got some nice natural light coming in, which really helps. Yeah, this moon mala, man. The moon mala was the one I wanted to buy. It's so beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, it is. I love these moss agate moons. I saw a bunch of these and then I kind of bought them all up, and I've been slowly making malas out of them. They're so interesting because each one is so unique but so beautiful. So I think I have maybe one or two more left, but not very many because I sold one a while ago. And then this one is one of my favorite malas to date because of this really cool like natural blue and gold tiger's eye carving. So this is tiger's eye. This is 14 karat gold beads, so they will not rust, they will not tarnish. You know, gold is gold. That's part of the reason why this one on my site is so expensive, because of these gold beads. And then we've got the white jade, which again is ensuring everything goes to its highest purpose. And then tiger's eye, which is an incredible stone of confidence and abundance and success and protection. It's very solar. So we have this kind of like solar but responsible. Anyway, I love the way this one turned out. This has this natural blue and gold tiger's eye. And you have to be careful with tiger's eye because some of them are dyed. These ones are natural. That's why they're kind of this more gray blue. But if you ever look online and you see like really bright blue tiger's eye, it's probably dyed. But these are natural and they're so beautiful too. I almost kept this one, but I just want to make more. I want to make more malas, so I have to sell them to keep up my habit. But oh, they're so beautiful. Some of these have some really good bright little bits. Anyway, so that's one of my more, I think, understated, because it's got that 14 karat gold and that tiger's eye, but the tiger's eye is like super high quality tiger's eye. So I was really happy to find it. It's really fun to work with tiger's eye when it's like really nice. It's one of those stones where like you can get cheap tiger's eye, which will do all the metaphysical things totally fine, you know, and be really, really, really inexpensive. So it's great to work with if you're on a budget. But if you can find like nice tiger's eye, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. It's like way more expensive, but it's just so pretty. And I don't know, what can I say? My Venus is in Virgo, so I want it to be the prettiest of all the pretties. But I'm really excited about this one. I really think this one is really beautiful. I mean, I think they're all beautiful, obviously, but plus yellow and gold, sorry, what I meant to say was gold and blue has such a regal combination color-wise, I think. So yeah, so those are all the malas. They're going to be available. Well, those ones that I just showed are already available at xiahunt.com, so you can go check that out if you're interested. And then I'm planning on posting my white lotus and aquamarine white jade lotus aquamarine mala later today. And then also this again is not a mala because it's not 108 beads. It's shorter, but it's very pretty and very elegant. So I want to be able to make more of those as well. Still have all of the metaphysical properties of the gemstones, just not in the same format as the mala, which tend to be a lot longer. Some people don't like how long the malas are. I, of course, really like them, so I make a lot of them. And plus, I really like the process of making them. The intentional knotting is like very meditative and calming, so I kind of like it when they're longer because then that process lasts longer. But the short ones are really beautiful. They sit really nicely too. So anyway, so that's all I have for today. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, or if you get any insights or any value out of these lives, then please like, subscribe, comment, all of those things. I would really appreciate it. Also, you can look at my first 3 podcast episodes. I put them in a playlist together, as well as all of these lives. Please do check out my Patreon, where I like to post exclusive sneak peeks of other in-process works for other decks and all kinds of stuff. So I would really appreciate any and all support, and I will see you guys next time.